I, male, 18, have been estranged from my grandfather since I was born. I only know of him through my parents, X and Y, as most of my relatives are a bit distant from us. My grandfather, Leroy, had served in the Pacific theater and worked in a factory during his adulthood. Grandma had passed away early in my mom's life, and my grandpa was her sole guardian. According to Mom, he was abusive, mean-spirited, and unnecessarily cruel. As soon as she got the chance, she moved out and skipped town, eventually marrying my dad, who my grandfather didn't approve of at all. After their marriage, Leroy and my parents were fully no contact. My parents were living outside of the US when I was born, and I didn't know much about my family history at first. Having been raised in Italy and then moving to Philly, I never really had the time to explore my family tree or bother talking to my grandfather. I accepted that he was a negative character and I believed everything my parents said. When I was a teen, though, I got curious about my grandfather after chancing upon his name in an article about World War II. I ended up sending him a letter asking to get to know him better. I didn't get a response for over 2 months, and then when I did, it was just a hateful piece of paper that said that he didn't want me as a grandson. I was torn up about this, and my mom sat down with me and told me that it wasn't my fault, and the years of no contact had not softened my grandfather as a person. That was when I was 14, and I decided that I didn't want someone in my life who wasn't open to change from the past. So I put all my thoughts of my grandpa, Leroy, to the back of my mind and began to move on. My family at this point was just X and Y and my older sister Z, female 23, and we all used to get along well. However, soon after I turned 18, I came home from high school to see my parents all sitting around the kitchen table with a lawyer explaining a document to them. That document was Grandpa Leroy's will. He had passed away just a few weeks ago, and this document left everything to me under the condition that not a single red cent goes to my parents or my sister. The lawyer asked to speak to me alone, and my family reluctantly walked away. I could see that they were discussing the whole situation in hushed tones already. The lawyer told me, "Kid, I'm not here just as a lawyer, but as a close friend of Leroy's. He was a neighbor and lived alone with just a nurse. I've been keeping him company for the last 5 years, and I wanted you to know how much he loved you." That's when I learned about the story from the other side. After I had sent that first letter all those years ago, Leroy wrote me letters too, but gave up after not getting a response. Despite that, he was touched by the letter I wrote and considered me to be the only family member that cared for him. I was confused by this and admitted to this lawyer that I had never received these letters to begin with. Resigning himself to not being able to contact me and being too old to come visit me, Leroy's lawyer's neighbor, Dan, helped him understand social media, and that's how he had been keeping up with my life through my public account. I was dismayed that I didn't get these letters because I would have at least been open to speaking with my grandfather. He got into the nitty-gritty of the estate details and walked me through the basics and how to get money, save tax, and whatnot. After an hour of discussing all of this, I was still puzzled as to how these letters didn't get to me and where that hateful letter came from. Dan mentioned explicitly that Leroy's wishes were for me to use the money and ensure that not a single cent goes to my parents or my sister. He gave me his card and asked me to call him after I talked with my parents. I could tell he wasn't ready to discuss the whole story at our house, and there was still something missing. With that, he went off, and I was left confused and reeling at the sudden windfall. My parents and my sister slowly shuffled in and began to inquire about the conversation. I didn't tell them everything, but they found out how much money I was getting, and my parents immediately began discussing ways to figure out loopholes in the will. Dad even said, "Son, it's your duty to share this with us. You know that your grandfather was a spiteful man who didn't want to help us. It's only right that you take advantage of this situation in a positive way." Everything was a mess. And I didn't know how to stick to my guns. I mean, I wanted to share the money with my parents, but I felt like they were hiding a lot from me. Because of that, I said I would think about it and we'll figure out a solution while making a mental note to go and call Dan as soon as I had some privacy. I called him later that day and he told me that he had a suspicion that the rest of my family had been actively hiding Leroy's letters from me and faked a letter too. When he asked them if Leroy had communicated with anyone in the family before this, they were quick to say no, no, not at all. That immediately set off alarm bells, and I told him I'll get to the bottom of this. I called some distant relatives and asked about Grandpa Leroy, although most of them were pretty hesitant to talk to me. I don't know why, but there seemed to be a rift between them and Mom. Eventually, I got the details from an aunt who decided I was old enough to know. Grandpa Leroy was nothing like the terrible person X and Y had painted him out to be. The reason they went no contact is that Mom stole her father's money and skipped town with Dad to get married. Even after all of that, Grandpa wanted to forgive them and had reached out to them several times, but they ignored him. I was furious and immediately stormed out and confronted them all. My parents were unashamed of what they had done and said that was what they needed to do to get a fresh start. Z knew about them withholding letters from me, and she had remained silent to not rock the boat. I was furious and told them I wouldn't give them a single dollar of my inheritance. At this, my parents lost it and told me that it was unfair of me to keep this money, and if I decided to do that, I would have no home to stay in. I stormed out with my bags and stayed at a friend's place. I got a call from Dan the day after inviting me to cross the states and come stay in Leroy's old house while we prepare for the legal action my parents are about to take. I know they will contest the will, and now I am going to drag them through court for being this selfish and self-centered. I know my parents were in the wrong, but I fully admit I was raging angry when I confronted them and don't know why they left Grandpa the way they did. Is there something I'm missing that could make me TA? Update 1. As I expected, my parents have decided to contest the will on the grounds that Grandpa lacked something called testamentary capacity. Basically, they're saying that he wasn't of sound mind. Furthermore, they're also claiming that Dan was an undue influence that made him sign this will instead of it going through Mom as a natural heir. This came in the middle of my moving down to Miami to live in Grandpa Leroy's condo, and I'm also figuring out my next step career and academics-wise. It's all really overwhelming, but Dan and his family have been super supportive and caring. Apparently, they considered Grandpa Leroy to be like family, and Dan's taking the case pro bono to make sure that I won't have to share anything with my toxic family. The emotional toll of being cut off from my parents is also super high, and I wish it could be resolved peacefully, but I know the only way they'll accept me is if I give them the money. And to be honest, they don't deserve it after doing so much stuff to Grandpa Leroy. I'm not one to believe in the afterlife and all that, but I do think it'd be disrespectful to his wishes to give money to Mom and Dad. However, I am still very curious about what drove my mom to steal from her father and run away. There are still a lot of things that need to come to light, but I hope that the new family I have found and my capabilities will see me through all of this turmoil. Update 2. I have decided to just focus on the case and settle in Miami for now. After all of this is out of the way, I'll put most of Grandpa Leroy's money into investments and live comfortably and follow my passions. The case has been going on for a few months, and I think my parents are being worn down by the whole affair. We're fighting them for it tooth and nail, and it seems like that the full amount is going to stay with me. Z has also begun to regret her part in the whole affair, and even called me once to check in and make sure I'm okay. I'm a little scared that she's only doing it so I'll give her some money, though. I've realized that huge sums of cash change people in a second. However, I was pleasantly surprised when she told me that she didn't want anything from me but wanted to give me something in return. For whatever reason, my parents had never burned or thrown away the letters from Grandpa Leroy, and Z had come across them later in her life. Maybe they had saved it to give to me at some point in my life. I don't know. But Z said she wanted to come down to Florida and give the letters to me behind our parents' backs. This is the first time I'm going to be meeting anyone from my old family in a while, and I'm a little excited, I'll admit. Update 3. Z was a joy to have over, and it's clear she's on my side now. Reading through the letters made her realize how badly our parents had screwed Grandpa Leroy over and robbed us of a relationship with him. His letters also mentioned how he had been disapproving of my parents' relationship at first, and that seems to be the catalyst that caused my parents to run away. But he'd recognized the error of his ways long ago, but they never forgave him. Z had eked information out of our parents about this, and it mostly had to do with Dad being with the wrong crowd at the time, a bunch of vandals and small-time robbers. That makes it even dumber for my parents to have acted the way they did. In my opinion, all the things they said about Grandpa's character seem to be directly countered by all of his friends and neighbors. Some of my relatives have also started reaching out to me now that I don't live with my parents anymore. Apparently, they had completely cut off X and Y and didn't know whether I was also a believer in their lies. The case was also settled in my favor, so I'm just looking ahead and living a life that my grandpa would have been proud of. Thank you all for your support. NTA, your parents clearly acted selfishly in the past and are doing it again. NTA, it's your money no matter what. I'm shocked that they withheld the letters from you. It already makes them guilty to me, IMO. They knew they were in the wrong. I get why you don't want to give anything to your parents, but why not your sister? She was just as manipulated by your parents as you were. He would have left her stuff as well had they ever established contact, but that wasn't possible due to your parents. Just something to think about. Next story. My girlfriend, 29, female, and I, 33, male, just moved to New York City. We're coming from Colorado, where we first began cohabiting together and now carrying that on in the Big Apple. We have a little less space now, but I don't think that bothers either of us too much. Even despite this move, my girlfriend and I have always been open and transparent when it comes to having our own individual lives away from each other. We love each other very much, but we understand that having a healthy relationship can often act as a byproduct to having a healthy individual state of mind. While we prioritize spending time together, we also hold doing things individually with high importance. So now that we're in New York City, we both needed gym memberships. In our search, I found a gym that I felt confidently would meet all of my needs. I was pretty sure it was the perfect fit. She was simultaneously doing her own search, but for whatever reason didn't come across the gym that I had found, and was generally underwhelmed with what she had found. She wasn't that excited about any of them. She wanted me to tell her about the one that I had found so she could consider joining herself. So I told her the name, she looked it up, and was very interested. It checked all her boxes as well. I told her that I preferred to keep the gym as separate activities, a space we could each have for ourselves. Or in other words, don't join the same gym I'm joining. I felt particularly strong about this considering we're living in a small apartment now, and I was clinging to the idea of a gym as my own personal getaway whenever needed. At first, her reaction was only slightly negative. I explained why I felt this way, and ultimately, she said she understood. I've since joined that gym and have been going regularly. But whenever I come home and she asks me, how was it? I tell her, great. And then I just feel a massive amount of guilt because I know she'd like to be a member as well. AITA? Edit. Clear consensus here that IATA, that's fair. Although one thing I'd like to clear up. Lots of people seem to think my motivation behind this is so that I can gawk, hit on, and maybe even sleep with other women at the gym in peace. Even if I were very, very single, I would never invade someone's personal space at a place like a gym. It's a safe space where people go for mental and physical health. I would never deteriorate that environment for someone else because I think they're attractive. Anyways, I apologized to my girlfriend earlier today. She scheduled a tour of the gym for this weekend. I told her I'll use all the referral credits I get from the gym if she signs up to go out to a nice dinner together. We're all assholes sometimes, but this makes me feel lucky to have her. I always knew she was the actual better half. She continues to show it too. Lucky guy. Why can't she go to the same gym as you if it meets both your needs? You don't have to go at the same time or go and work out together. I don't understand your need to prevent her from joining that gym. YTA. Next story. I'm actually also surprised I'm defending my brother, but here goes. So, my older brother had issues. He was essentially one of those bratty and evil kids you read stories about. He got older and got into drugs and other illegal stuff. Our parents had enough and kicked him out after he became uncontrollable. It was mostly done for me as I was still pretty young. We didn't hear from or about him until he was in his early 20s. Turns out he was married, had a good job, and a kid on the way. Now he has 3 kids and is still happily married to a very lovely woman. We each see each other on Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, and a week during the summer, but he mostly comes so our parents can see the kids. He usually doesn't say anything and keeps to himself. At first I was afraid, confused, and resentful for a lot of things, but I have since forgiven him. He's not a bad guy, honestly, never was. He just needed help. My parents hosted Thanksgiving, and it was pretty normal, the usual. All of a sudden, there's a sound of glass breaking. My nephew accidentally dropped a plate while trying to help my mom set up. My mom loses it. She starts yelling at him. The poor kid starts sobbing. He's only 8 and runs to his mom. My brother obviously asks our mom what that was about and that it was just an accident, and my mom immediately goes, "Oh, shut up. Maybe if I yelled at you more, you wouldn't have made everyone's life a living hell." My brother didn't even react. He and his wife just gathered their kids and left. My mom immediately started to cry once she realized he wasn't coming back and said that she didn't deserve this and that he has no right to keep her away from her grandkids. I told her that he actually does have the right to do that, especially since she lost it on his innocent 8-year-old son. My mom started to cry even harder and said that she didn't need my opinion and that she can't believe I'm on his side after everything he did and everything she did to protect me from his addiction, etc. "I kicked my child out of the house for you," is what she said. In a way, I guess she's right. I probably should have kept my mouth shut. But my brother has grown so much as a person, and it didn't feel right to hear her still blame him for the actions of his child, teenage self. AITA? NTA, yelling at her grandkid, 8-year-old, for accidentally dropping a plate. Then she insults her son and holds a grudge against him for doing better for himself. Then she cries and makes it about herself. Then says, "I kicked him out for you," like it's your fault your brother got kicked out. Instead of giving him resources and actual help, she kicked him out? Are you serious? The lack of accountability, the intense, rapidly changing emotions, the yelling. She needs therapy. Your brother may have been an AH just to survive living with your mom. NTA, he didn't do anything to intentionally antagonize the situation. That was your mother, unleashing likely years of repressed guilt and anger at him. Your brother exited the house rather than argue back. That's more mature than your mother did. NTA, but mom needs therapy. You guys saw a broken plate. She saw years of pain and disappointment. Suggest to her gently that speaking to someone will help. And maybe have a quiet catch up with your brother to work out some stuff between you without other family members around. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.